Good. So I will just start talking and counting numbers. I can't count in prime numbers, but I can just say gibberish. I don't know how to say the Jabberwocky poem, but if I keep talking blankly and incoherently, nobody would actually notice the difference, but they might actually start paying attention. And it actually usually does work. So welcome to the part that I've been waiting for. We had the appetizer with Meredith Baker. We had the meat and veg with the two panels, and now we have the dessert, which is the conversation between Commissioner Mignon Clyburn and Bryan Tramont. Before I say a few words about Commissioner Clyburn, just something about Bryan. Most of you know him. He's the managing partner at Wilkinson, Knauer, and he's a senior adjunct fellow here at Silicon Flatirons. He's got a long list of awards, including you're officially now, as I'm sure you know, one of the top 100 Washington lawyers, so top communications lawyer. You know, the usual kind of thing for a stellar lawyer, served for lots of commissioners, ended up as chief of staff working for Commissioner Powell. But more important for us here at Silicon Flatirons is the ways in which Bryan gives back. And I just want to mention a couple. I mean, he really has a commitment to mentoring and paying it forward. So, for example, he's been doing the Maymester Spectrum course with Dale for many, many years. He's an adjunct law professor at Catholic University. And then all the other public service things, you know, for his sins, and I don't know how many years you get off in purgatory, but quite a few. He's been serving on the CISMAC, including chair of the CISMAC for a couple of years. So one of the key people in this field. Now, Commissioner Clyburn, a remarkable public service. People always say, you know, so-and-so needs no introduction. I just wish I had more time to talk about the things that I've discovered. The Commissioner has a reputation of looking at issues through the lens of how they affect disempowered people. People like low-income communities, minority consumers, rural folks, small business folks. One of the ones that jumped out at me, that caught my eye, was the work on telemedicine. For example, the Connect to Health FCC joint task force that the Commissioner set up with the chairman. And that seems to me to be characteristic, because telemedicine delivered through high-speed broadband really is often has the greatest benefit to the people who are the least well-served. And that's a wonderful force multiplier. The Commissioner began her service at the FCC in 2009. Before that, had 11 years with the Public Service Commission in South Carolina, including a couple of years as the chair. And before that was an entrepreneur and ran a small business. Most recently, she served as acting chair at the FCC between Chairmans Janikowski and Wheeler for 6 months last year. And it was insanely productive. I mean, it's just, you know, I would bet it's the most achieved per month of tenure by any FCC chairman ever.
No.
You know, I was looking at this long list of things, and I had 4 minutes. So, you know, I'll just mention two, probably pretty much at random. The one was ushering in the 700 megahertz cellular interop. Which is a really sticky issue that was really a tough thing for small operators for a long time. And another very important thing was overseeing the creation of new rules for phone calls for inmates in prisons, to address the fact that, you know, you can make the joke yourself about prisoners and monopolies, but they were paying crazy rates, and the Commissioner, as acting chair, addressed that. Oh yeah, and there was a 16-day government shutdown in the middle of it. And for those who are keeping score, the first woman chair of the FCC. And on top of all that, she has a reputation, well-deserved, for being a tireless friend of students and of young lawyers that are trying to find their way. And as you all know, that's something that really matters a lot to us here at Silicon Flatirons. So, you know, here we have somebody who's living proof that you don't have to be a Washington insider to make a huge difference. And, you know, that, by the way, to be blunt, that means you don't have to be a white male telecom lawyer.
Not that there's anything wrong with those, just to be clear.
Yeah.
Speak for yourself.
And this is Commissioner Clyburn's first visit to Silicon Flatirons, and we dearly hope it won't be the last.
Thank you so much, Professor. I appreciate
Welcome.
it. Thank you.
How's it going?
No complaints to matter. What's going on with those socks?
Well, I had to, Travis led the way, so I was trying to be, up to.
I don't know if you
Travis'
can see under the table, but it's
sartorial
making
splendors.
quite a statement.
I was trying, yeah. So anyway, so not much going on at the commission this week. You guys sort of coasted around.
My gosh, we've been just sitting around doing nothing. It's been all quiet on the outside, all quiet at the chairman's house, all quiet.
The chairman's house especially, yes.
Oh, my gosh.
That chairman thing's overrated, I think, or at least you need to do it at the right time. Maybe
Well,
it's
it's all about timing. You guys do know that, right?
So let's start, the whole conference is obviously about wireless, and there's a few specific panels today that have talked about very specific issues, and I want to get to those, but why don't we start kind of at a 10,000-foot level if we can. So what does wireless mean at a broad sort of, as a policymaker, as an industry leader, what does it mean as an economic matter? And you made a speech this week, I think, where you talked about broadband as the great equalizer.
Right.
And maybe talk a little bit about that, what you've seen around the country about the impact of mobile devices on the economy, on education, what have you.
Again, thank you. It is my pleasure to be here. I hope there's some students still left. If not, I understand. It's the end of the day. It's a semi-beautiful day. I'm from the South, so, a little snow on the ground. It's not that attractive to me, but that's another. But when I think about this in a global sense, your question. Because I've seen all over the world a difference a cell phone has made. My first trip abroad as an FCCer was to the Gambia, where I saw farmers who were previously starving. I mean, they were trying to make a living, but they weren't doing it quite well enough because you had these middle men, mostly men. Middlemen basically stripping away their profits. Now, with a 2G phone, they've got access to, price signals. Yeah. They can say that if I go down this road, I will get, so many cents per pound, but if I go this way, I get a few more cents. It's making an incredible difference worldwide. It is really empowering people. I met this one woman you hear me talk about, and I get emotional about it, illiterate. But she's got these icons on the phone. She's a shea butter farmer, and she can take her orders directly. And she has realized a 70% increase in her profit margins, because again, she's directly dealing with, with her customers. I see that domestically, where mobility is enabling persons, we always talk about creativity in the garages, enabling persons without garages, to be able to connect around the world, to have that broadband connectivity, so they don't need brick and mortar, they don't need that upkeep, they don't need that business that will eat away at their profits. Whatever their goods or service, even if the goods or service, and we're talking about, legally sound, good and service is them, the product in which they produce themselves, if they're the commodity, that it is truly making a difference. So I just in the past few years alone, I have just seen this propel individuals, particularly those creative types, to say, hey, look at me. I don't have to have, a producer or a manager. I don't have to have, someone saying, greenlighting my project. I am the greenlighter of my own project. It has been so empowering until I remain excited.
You and I had an opportunity to meet some remarkable young women up in New York that were doing some mobile app development. You want to tell the crowd a little bit about that?
Well, this particular group was, I think earlier, I think Pierre might have mentioned, no, it might have been the dean mentioning the lack of women in this space in terms of, particularly in a hierarchy. There, of course, is a 2% problem that we talk about in Silicon Valley, meaning the lack of minorities in this space. But what I saw at this conference was a group that's trying to bridge that gap. Some talented, creative app developers, some individuals who said, I'm not going to wait for someone to say whether my project is going to make it. I'm going to produce my own project online And that will enable people to see my project. And now, instead of me knocking on doors, they're calling on me. So this is just the power of technology, the power of the things that you might not, this might not be your side of the equation, but the things that you're talking about, it's enabling some persons who could not get noticed that they are creating their own ecosystem. It's just incredible.
A couple of those apps were healthcare related, as to compliance with taking your meds, and as well as some, I believe, prenatal care for young women who are pregnant and making sure that they're taking care of themselves. Talk a little bit about what the SEC is doing on telehealth. You're a leader in that area, and there's a big mobility component to all of that that sort of it puts a lens on everything that we've been discussing here today.
So when we talk about, when I talk about broadband or technology being a great enabler, and being able to, in a very efficient way, address a lot of our critical national priorities and divides, I can't think of a better place than healthcare. A little known reality check. There are fewer today, there are fewer than 400,000 primary care professionals serving this entire country. So I'm talking about primary doctors and those, those nurses that are, again, not specialists, but are considered, primarily health, and that includes physicians, assistants, and the like. They cannot possibly serve a nation of 300+ million people. But technology can be the tool, the bridge, the enabler to bridge those gaps, to answer those divides, to enable people to take their own health care in their hands. So the FCC says we've got a role too. We had a traditional role in terms of rural health care initiatives, in terms of funding that, but we are not satisfied with that because we see how things are migrating. We see how people are consuming, particularly on the mobile side, and we think and we know if we really increase these partnerships, help to educate persons, including in that digital literacy framework in terms of helping individuals, including health care, enabling capacities in that. We know that we can really, tackle some serious divides. I am from the stroke belt, the diabetes belt. I'm from South Carolina. So whatever belt it is that is a challenge, I lived it, for a number of years in terms of who my neighbors were. I know technology can be the conduit to change those challenges, and that's why this Connect to Health FCC is so important. Just working through, cutting through the red tape, but allowing this device to be your enabler, to be your helper, to be your lifeline, so to speak. And we've just scratched the surface on that, so I remain excited about what that will bring.
And the Commission's done, obviously, some important things on this front. The M-Bands docket, which was talked about earlier today, wireless medical telemetry. There's a bunch of sort of interesting crossovers, even on the spectrum side, in addition to the work that Telehealth Forum's doing.
One of the things that I often say about technology is I look at it in two parts. I look at it as an entire mile, but I divide it into one half. Because if you've got all of the infrastructure and all of the things that you're talking about, if you have that, but you do not have the tools that will allow those consumers to be able to take full use of it, then to me, you're building a technology bridge to nowhere. So that's why, again, I keep talking about this. Healthcare is my focus right now, but it's in everything that means everything to us in terms of education, civic engagement, and the like. And so that's why this is so important. It's what it enables that counts, and I'm trying to do my part to facilitate better use.
And in that regard, you'll be
more efficient use. You've been talking about saying that all day.
The third word is for the spectrum bingo game. Right. Everyone has efficiency. And we should mention You're going to be visiting CU's Anschutz Medical Facility on Monday morning and visiting the facility that does a lot of work with distant telehealth for tribal communities.
Right.
So that'll be terrific and dovetails right into this, especially in underserved communities like tribal lands.
You know, one of the things, and I mentioned I'm from South Carolina. I'm proud to be from South Carolina, even with our challenges. And one of the things that we noted is this makes economic sense when we talk about, broadband mobility, particularly when it comes to healthcare. You've got an expected mother who's high risk, who lives in the most rural part of South Carolina. The teaching hospital is 100+ miles away. It makes no sense to transport that mother. Telemedicine can be the key. You've got higher incidence of challenges with individuals who might need psychiatric help. You know the stigma that we haven't come to terms with in this country. Telemedicine, that type of the platform that will enable that will give that person the privacy, the comfort they need to seek the type of help. This matters. This makes a difference in everyday lives. Meredith talked about, being connected, the connectivity, or I can't remember how she put it, but, how this means everything connected, everything connected.
Connected life.
Yeah, connected life. Thank you. I would have come up with it tomorrow. But it really is appropriate. Those two words really are appropriate to describe what we're just on the cusp of. I mean, it's been remarkable so far, but what we're on the cusp of achieving, and I'm just really proud to be just play a small role in it.
So speaking of a connected life, so people of color have sort of led the way in cord cutting, both in terms of for voice services, but a lot of broadband too.
Right.
How does that inform how you look at policy issues? That the wireless platform may be for many sound economic reasons, people's only connection, or for convenience, only broadband connection. How does that inform your policy making?
You guys may not have heard, but we've got this looming item called the open internet that we're going to in the coming days, weeks, or months, because I'm not going to reveal when we plan to put that on the agenda. That's before us, and I talk or speak less in terms of what platform or what title we're going to use, and I speak more in terms of what characteristics or what types of variables that need to be a part of that equation. When you bring this up, some of the things that I'm asking and trying to glean from people who engage in this docket. There's a joke between us about the word engage that I know he will bring up, later. It has nothing to do with this, obviously, because that's a joke too, but that's another story. But when we talk about that, the questions I ask is, what does this mean for 56% of low-income individuals who have completely cut the cord and are totally reliant on a mobile, on their mobile device? What does it mean for those Latinos, regardless of their income? 50% of Latinos are mobile only, and so many people, and particularly those who do not have broadband at home, this is their only device in terms of broadband connectivity. So when we talk about sort of the rules of the roads and what the elements need to be in that, for me to make a decision as to which pathway to take, I take all of those things into consideration. I need some questions asked, answered about what does it mean for the consumer. We talk. There's a lot of discussion, and Meredith and I have had very interesting discussions about what we call, parity. I want to ask those questions. What does it mean, for these consumers, and what are the things that we need to take into account, and how, as the environment changed? If you remember, when we first took this up, about 4 years ago, there were 200,000 LTE customers. Today, there are 120 million. The world has changed. And as painful as it may be right now in terms of some of the open internet debate, what is great about where we are and that we are reconsidering or considering what path to take is the fact that we've got the benefit of 4 years to say, were we right? What has changed? And I think I try to look at things, in a positive way in terms of what this will allow us to do, that we can benefit from all of the economic, growth and development and see if we were right and make the right decision going forward.
So let's go ahead and do open internet briefly. We'll stop there. So two big things the wireless industry has mentioned frequently. One is that the technology is technologically different because you have congestion issues. We had some experiences north of the border recently where there was a big spike in use that strained networks. And what does that mean in terms of how the rules should be structured? The second is that the argument is that it's more competitive, right? You do not have 4 or 5 broadband pipes into your home, but for 90+% of American consumers, you do have 4 or 5 choices for a wireless provider. So how do those two factors play in how you think about open internet?
When I look at, I look at the fact that by the end of this year, we're going to have more, phones than people around the world. It's been that way in the U.S., for quite some time. I look at the fact, just like we said, when you look at the entire, including this commissioner, I've cut the cord. Sorry, those of you in the legacy business, I have cut the cord.
It's a Spectrum conference. That's popular.
Yeah, right.
You're good
so,
on that one.
I guess you might be okay with that. And so when you've got 40% of, those like me, who are reliant on a mobile-only framework, the discussion and the challenges in the debates change a bit. So, yes, things are different when it comes to one platform or the other, but this is when we need to have more discussions about what is reasonable network management and is that enough to address it. Because, again, I keep going back to what is the use, what is the volume, what is the reliance, what is the dependence, where the trends are. They don't appear to be turning around. I don't see people running back to their, wired, platform, even though I recognize, like you, that wired infrastructure is so vital and critical to that wireless infrastructure. I know that, I get that. But people want that device to be everything to them. It is everything to them, and they're not about to go give that up in order to have to run home and make a call when the emergency might be up the street. So these are the types of things that I think are going to be at the heart for me of the open internet. And I don't use N squared. I use open internet. The N squared phrase to me causes everybody to go in their corners. When you talk about open internet, this is just a Mignon Clyburn personal quirk. To me, it just reinforces what we're talking about and what this is, how empowering this platform is, what our objectives are to have a free and open and vibrant and inclusive infrastructure. And so that's why you hear me say open internet, and I don't use the N squared.
Interesting, because it started as internet freedom, and then it turned to net neutrality, and then now we got open internet. So who knows where it could end up next? We have to. It's like a brand.
It's going to end up with a decision, apparently.
Well, there's a lot of evidence to the contrary, actually. But, all right. So we're 4 years removed from the National Broadband Plan.
Yes.
So, and the president's call for 500 megahertz of spectrum, very ambitious, unprecedented. No president of the United States has ever set such an ambitious goal.
Yep.
Nor has any president ever talked about spectrum as much as this one has. How are we doing with that 500 megahertz goal? And what do you see we're going to talk a little bit more in detail about the specific auctions, but let's talk about sort of the general overview of how we're doing.
Oh my goodness, we have made great progress. That was, as you said, a very ambitious goal. I mean, you're talking about almost doubling the amount of spectrum that is used for broadband in that very short period of time. And we are well on our way of making that goal, because by 2015, the goal was to bring 300 megahertz of spectrum to market. We're well on that goal. You know what's going on today, that started yesterday, that 65 megahertz of spectrum that we have a very active participatory engagement. And when I looked at round 7, see, I'm trying to use different words. When I checked at round 7, we were up to $4.7 billion. You guys might have a more of an updated figure. So there's a lot of engagement. It's a lot of engagement. He says I overuse the word engagement, but I think engagement, unless it's Mignon's marital status, is a fabulous word. That is totally another story. It is almost 6 o'clock. I turned into a different type of person, apparently.
It's good to know for the question and answer period, because that's going to be after 6 o'clock. Engagement may take on a whole new form during that period. Anyway, so the 500 megahertz. So,
and then look, you've been talking about it all day in terms of the tools that we are, using. In terms of, we're using traditional, we're going through a traditional model, but what we're also doing that I'm proud about is pushing and working with all of you to talk about how can we gain more, realize more efficiencies. How can we get rid of outdated rules on the books that are prohibiting us to, from doing and realize the best things. Pierre was very kind to mention the work we did in terms of interoperability. That was a prime example of inefficiency in terms of, prime spectrum. And what we did, and that's a different story that we can talk about over some wine. It's an incredible story. And I'm not just saying that because I was acting chair. Thank you very much. But what was incredible, what was wonderful about that is all of this, and I'm still looking at it, and all of the variables that were present that needed to be worked out, and that's the theme, the recurring theme for this conference, right?
Yep.
That when we talk about how we clear and repurpose spectrum, particularly with the federal government, it's going to take layer upon layers of what's my word? Engagement. In order for us to work out all of the particulars, and we are in it for the long haul.
So let's talk about that. So during the golden era, which is what we call your chairmanship, when presidents did...
You can tell we have a little familiarity, so let me apologize to you for what you are suffering through right now.
So during the golden era, when you were chair and the president did not make speeches about your policy issues or make videos about them, as we do now, you did manage to pull together this extraordinary deal on interoperability. But interoperability, as you just pointed out, was only one part of that spectrum puzzle. The interoperability issue had been around for 7 or 8 years. You also managed to pave the way for the H-block auction.
Yes.
And you granted flexibility to MSS. And you solved the interference issues associated with the unpaired E-block at 700. So just how do you... Well, a little bit about why those issues were so important to you. And also, it may be the most complex spectrum deal the commission has ever cut that has actually worked, which is because you've already had H-block auction, right. MSS flexibility is already in place, interoperability, the devices are moving along faster. Not only was it complex, which the commission has a fair number of those, but it actually worked.
It took a woman. But I no matter what it is, I'm really kind of serious about that, but I'll move on to them. But in all seriousness, one of the things that, and this is the most serious I will be tonight, when you hear about the things that Bryan talked about and what Pierre mentioned, they were all barriers to efficiencies and barriers for, and I think that's my takeaway word. I usually have a word of the day, barriers to success and greatness. They were prohibiting small providers that could better bridge a communications gap in rural, hard-to-serve areas. They were landlocked. You know, there was so much optimism in 2008. And then the standard-setting body went into one direction, and they were landlocked for a number of years. We just were insane enough to think that we could do something and make a difference. We did it the old-fashioned way. You know, again, I'm a Southern, not so country girl. I say country girl, but you can see me, I'm not that country. I'm real Southern, but not that country. But we went into 8th South, sat in a room.
It's a conference room for those.
That's a conference room, I'm sorry. With a nice view, incidentally. But we sat in a room, we didn't lock the doors, but we pretended that there were, and we talked it out. And I really don't think with all of the real and perceived gridlock in Charleston, in the District of Columbia, that we had a little drama in Charleston. Again, I'll tell you about that over 2 glasses of wine. That's not done enough. Because what I heard was something that I think because of all of the years of gridlock, what the others couldn't hear, what we heard was they were really not that far apart. That's what we heard. And so we, with Louis here, he was integral in that. We took a lot of risk because the small providers who were rightfully, they were upset, and they got all of this investment that they were losing money on. And it was almost midnight. This is one of those stories. It was almost midnight, the night before I had to make up my mind whether or not to circulate an order or to, as I like to jokingly say, give peace a chance. And that was the most difficult decision I ever made because I've got the providers saying, Mignon, please, you circulated an order. But I was just, had enough confidence that what I heard in that room, that them not being that far apart and just, dropping hints everywhere. And I shouldn't let you in on the secret. Whoever would listen, it was the doorman. I'm like, do you know anybody that can help me with interoperability? You think I'm really not exaggerating. Anybody that I thought would do it would listen and kind of give voice to what I knew would be the best, most efficient way to get to get them to dig up ground and to provide service to those rural communities. I did. And so, again, it's just another example of, attempting to do it the old-fashioned way, which honestly seems to be a lost art, in D.C. and around the world. But we are reaping the benefits of that now. We would still be in court fighting each other had I circulated that order. We decided not to do so, and it was one of the best professional decisions I've ever made.
So let's pivot to some more of the conference topics today. Sharing, a lot of attention on sharing, right? There's the PCAST report that sort of is a paradigmatic shift in some ways about how the federal government thinks about sharing. How does it fit into the overall set of tools that you have for spectrum management? And Meredith talked this morning about sort of sharing versus clearing, or how those two things fit together. You want to talk a little bit about how you...
I could not agree with what she said more, that has got to be one of the main tools in our toolbox. But we have to make sure that we continue to refine and sharpen those tools. We have, where there is still, where there's room for, sharing, we are absolutely all in. Where there's, a room for, clearing a single purpose, we've got to, we've got to be there. That is the most, to me, efficient way for us to move forward. But we have to have. There is a need, for dedicated, single-purpose spectrum too. But it is definitely one of the most important tools that could be a sort of a bridge until we get enough spectrum repurposed, and you're balancing all of these things. I don't have to tell you, and the staff has done a yeoman's job about working with DOD, NTIA, and the other federal agencies to really clear the path for for these opportunities. And again, I have to thank visionaries like Dale Hatfield and Pierre and so many others in this room for really showing us and challenging us and giving us through the advisory committees, through the TAC, the type of support we needed to go to those agencies and say, here's a pathway forward. It has got to be an integral part of the toolbox, but it is but one.
So speaking of the visionary Dale, he's talked a lot about the need for incentives, and the president agrees with Dale, SISMAC agrees with Dale. We should try and find ways to increase incentives for federal government users to use their spectrum more efficiently, or perhaps to repurpose.
Right.
How should we as a country move forward on incentives? It's been a vexing problem for a long time, and obviously not all of this is you, right? NTIA is going to have to deal with some of this, but you've been dealing with these issues for a number of years now. How do you think about incentives?
So one of my colleagues talks about, oftentimes when we're incented to do something, there is some benefit, usually economic, at the end of the rainbow. Let's put that on the table. You talked about or hinted about, receiver standards that would increase the efficiency in terms of existing, spectrum. Encourage the federal government to be more efficient with their spectrum. That's got to be, all a part of the equation. So I don't, and really, you weighing in with some of our, open, notices, and saying this is what I think will work, because clearly we don't have all of the answers. Some seem like low-hanging fruit just to speak about, but there are so many things on the horizon that we're open about that I hope you will continue to weigh in wherever you can. There are a couple of open proceedings now that all of the ideas. I don't want, and I know this will not happen. Oftentimes we're in academic settings, and all of these good ideas, you get excited about them being generated, and they don't make their ways off campus.
Right.
This is one of those times where we can ill afford for that to happen, because honestly, spectrum, I don't have to tell you, is a finite resource. We've got to stretch, bend, twist, as much as possible. And all of the things that you're discussing about here, and I heard you tee up whatever's going on in March that now you got me really curious about, because you talked about it three times in a minute.
You're welcome to come back, I'm sure.
This has got to, it's got to be shared, off campus.
So speaking of sharing off campus, so there, obviously as we move into more intensive spectrum use and more dynamic spectrum use, there's going to be a premium put on enforcement. And Travis was obviously on the last panel talking through some of those issues. Rebecca's here, who's responsible for the entire western region of the United States on these issues with limited personnel and resources. How do you, so if you could increase your budget, that'd be good. But no, so.
Well, I might, I can't personally solicit, but the rest of you can. And so if you've got some friends on the Hill that will say, okay, so I would not discourage you from doing that.
There you go. So, but other than resources, what are the things, what are some of the, is the commission, do we have enough resources for spectrum enforcement? What do we need to be thinking about from where you sit on spectrum enforcement going forward as these challenges obviously become more and more difficult to root out?
I think oftentimes, and this goes back to something that I know, Meredith's ears are burning. We don't give ourselves enough credit for the things that we've done. I talked about us, just reviewing rules on the books that would get us to where we want to get faster. I know I'm as frustrated as you. I'm not an attorney, so I get frustrated oftentimes going through an NOI, NPRM, and go through this, reply. It really often takes a long period of time. But on some issues, with all due respect, some of that time is justified. So what I'm hoping that I'm hearing, that I've heard more than once when you're talking about different approaches, you're challenging us, to be more lean. You might, Milo, might want us to kind of shift some decision making here or there. That's what I think I heard you say repeatedly. But we need to have these conversations, but one of the things that we need to be more flexible. We are more flexible, I think, when we talk about Wi-Fi and like, we've shown flexibility, we've shown dexterity. All of these things that we, Bluetooth and all of these things that we are realizing, right now, the benefits of they're happening because the FCC went outside of its traditional blocks to do some things. So when you talk about enforcement, we want to be as proactive as possible. Travis, mentioned to you some of the things that they're doing that would leverage the type of the talents and capacities that you have. It's going to be going back to what Julius used to say it all the time, and all of the above approach for us to, but we've come a long way. I don't want us to lose sight, and I might be a little defensive of my agency, that we've done some things already. We've got a lot of things to do. So when we talk about whether there should be a command and control model, when you say, if somebody is saying get rid of it all, altogether, I pause a bit because often, because there's not a one size fits all. Every situation is not the same. We've got to keep all of that in mind. And if you are on the other side of the conversation, so to speak, I think you would be, wanting a due process also. So. Fair enough.
All right, so it's after 6, so this should be the good questions now. So let's open it up for some questions, and there's a preference given to spectrum management with Hatfield and Tramont alums, I think, should get the first cuts at the questions. What do we got? Oh, don't make me call on y'all. All right, Tyler.
So you're sort of notable for your deference to sort of public interest groups, I guess. So specifically, I worked with some disability groups in the clinic last spring, and it's pretty well known that you give a lot of deference to their interest and sort of their opinions. And I'm just wondering, as you've the longest serving member on the commission, not a slight at all, but how you maintain that deference despite your sort of accumulation of experience in the field.
Well, one of the things, I set a sort of a baseline when I first got at the FCC, and you might have heard me say this story. My first 30 days, I really didn't take any outside meetings, with the exception of public interest groups. And the reason why I did that, because I recognized that these groups, often are on shoestring budgets, and I just wanted to talk to them before I heard from some of you. To say, what are your concerns? What are the challenges in this space? But I also said to them something that is being tested right now, is that we're not going to agree on everything. That my role as a regulator, which I've done for a long time now, 16 years, my lens is different. I had a group, with full disclosure, to come to me that wanted me to weigh in on my position on this open internet issue. And I told them, to be quite frank, that they were asking too much. I said to them, and this is a challenge of a regulator as opposed to no matter where your empathies or sympathies lie, I've got a role to play that is an incredibly complex balancing act, that you're a part of the consumer mix that I have to consider in my decision making. And if I were to go about when a docket, or when something is circulating, tell you what my position is right then, it closes the door on a lot of negotiation and a lot of dexterity that I think ultimately, everyone would benefit. So yes, but it of course comes with terms and conditions. Again, they're not 100% happy with me right now, but just as I set a baseline or you know, when I met with them first, I also tried to let them know a little bit more about me in terms of as long as that oath of office is enforced on that wall, I've got to attempt to conduct myself. I haven't done it 100% right all the time, but conduct myself in a way that's answerable to all. And that's a part of the challenge, but I don't know.
Another question? John.
We seem to know everybody.
Sorry, well, these are the students first.
Okay.
Commissioner, it's a privilege to have you here in Boulder at Silicon Flatiron, so thank you for weathering the cold.
Thank you.
I think a lot of people find your story about how cell service can unlock potential, economic potential throughout the world very, very inspiring. So I was wondering if you see opportunity for the U.S. telecom industry, as well as the U.S. regulators, to try and push that, unlocking that opportunity throughout the world. In addition to here for underserved populations.
I'm happy to say that we're doing that. It probably doesn't get as many headlines as it deserves. You know, we're working with our sister agencies in terms of, we might not directly finance, but they do, USAID and the like. There are lots of delegations that come into the office, into the FCC, and we have a series of tutorials on whatever the topic that they are most likely or more interested in. We work with
USTTI.
USTTI. He knew where I was going. You know, there are a lot of scholars or professors or tutors that are FCC employees that work with persons, particularly my counterparts, particularly from developing nations. I've got, I think, long-lasting relationships with a number of countries that, that from a political standpoint, we might have some differences with, but from an economic standpoint and wanting to serve their citizens, we're in harmony. I don't care what country that I've had conversations with, we're all talking about how do we get broadband, you know, to that last mile. Every single conversation I have with, you know, my counterparts is, so tell me a little bit more about this universal service structure and you know, how maybe we can take some lessons from that. So there are exchanges that are going on nonstop that, you know, maybe part of its successes, you know, a lot of people don't know about. But we're, you know, really committed to not telling or being, you know, or bragging about what has worked here, but just sharing some of the lessons and learning some of the lessons. You know, there's some white spaces, you know, white spaces experiments that are going on that I think can be imported in this nation to really, you know, help more affordably, you know, connect and enable hyper-rural areas or sparsely populated areas in the United States. So it's very much a give and take. So that's happening.
Next question.
Yes, sir.
Austin. While he's getting the microphone, have you hired all your summer interns yet?
So no.
Oh, good. Okay, just want to
Okay.
note that for afterwards. Okay, yeah, go ahead. Sorry.
Note to self.
Note to self. There you go.
Thank you, Commissioner, and thank you, Bryan.
And who are you?
I'm Austin Gaddis, and I am 2L here at the law school. Okay. I'm curious as to how you see the FCC's role in the future of spectrum exploration. You know, for instance, Google submitted a filing to the FCC several weeks ago looking for the ability to test in some pretty high bands. Mm-hmm. I'm curious, as we embark on this new technology or exploring this kind of new type of 5G type development, how you see the FCC's role in that going forward, what kind of footprint you see the FCC having on that, and
just kind of what your thoughts are about how that can kind of further open up connectivity to low income or rural areas.
So one of the things that you made me think about, I'm one of those politicians that might not, I'm a PK, a politician's kid. So I may or may not directly answer your question, but that's just how I'm wired. So let me, when you,
That's okay. Travis did that earlier.
So, one of the things you made me think about is some of the experiments that we put out, for bid that we've got 200 responses from, and they're not the usual suspects. They're not, the legacy suspects. We've got co-ops. We've got, it's just a cornucopia of entities. And I think about that I thought about that when you answered that question, that we're going to be stretched. And we're going to be tested with a mantra, with a refrain that we often say, that being technology neutral, to be open to experiments, to really, particularly in those areas that are underserved, how can we best get there? And if it's not through the legacy providers, then okay. So that's what I thought about when you said that, and so we will continue to do, and that was part of the reason for the, putting out the notice for these rural broadband experiments. And again, 188 responses for, of course, it's always oversubscribed in terms of the amount of money that we have allocated, but that's just the nature of it. But that could really prove, beneficial for what's next. If those experiments worked as projected, then the sky is truly the limit for the things that you're talking about in more places. So it's an exciting time. It's politically sensitive, a little frustrating at times, especially this time. But I remain optimistic because my goodness, there are fewer and fewer barriers and borders. And you're, all of you are helping to, fuel and make that possible. So, I might be a little tired and scared to read the headlines, but I remain optimistic because I know the next series of headlines that will be birthed from this experience that we share is going to be positive for more people.
Let's do one final question. Yep, Blake. Thank you, Eli, for giving me the extra 5 minutes. I was worried you were going to start jumping up and down over there.
And I appreciate you guys for not running.
Hi, Commissioner Clyburn. Blake
Right.
Reed. I run our tech law and policy clinic, and I wanted to ask a question kind of on behalf of some of the students in the room. We get a lot of folks that come to law school that are really interested in careers in public interest and social justice, but don't necessarily make the connection to technology, and maybe vice versa. And I was wondering, as someone who's really singularly been able to connect themes of social justice and the public interest to really sophisticated technology and telecom policy as you have, what advice would you give to law students who are interested in pursuing a career that blends both of those things?
It is a good one. Uh-oh. Now it's too close to 7 o'clock for me. Let's see. That good ideas and good people need to be in a variety of places, and that there needs to continue to be this cross-pollination of ideas and concepts that find what it is. Let me go back. You made me think about something. Again, this goes back to the being raised as a P kid. When you got your first job, or when you noticed that first thing that bothered you, I always say to people, if they want to do something different that's service-oriented, go back to that day, because there was something that you said, oh my gosh, I wish somebody could do something about that. Well, you're the somebody, and technology better enables you to do something about it. So it's hard for me to answer you precisely, but in terms of what the motivation and what technology can do to make that opportunity more vast, for you to find more people more, in a more efficient manner, to be more ubiquitous in terms of what the possibilities are. That's the great enabler and equalizer and potential for technology. we can literally cure every single ailment that we have through technology. I mean, seriously, we can do it. We just need to make a few tweaks and some adjustments, and get enough, people who care about these things, and erase some very critical divides off the map. So I will say that, as the people who raised me say to me, do what it is that you would do without a paycheck. Whatever it is you care about that you would do, even if you get paid or not, that's where, that's the path that you should follow. And there are others that are similarly situated, and you can literally change the world one neighborhood at a time by doing that. Thank you.
On that very appropriate note, a round of applause for Commissioner Clark.
Thank you.
Who I believe just said she'd work for free. But invite everyone to join us next door for the reception to follow. Thank you all very much for coming.